The Wyoming wind carries more than just snow. It carries secrets, and it carries the sound of death. For Matilda Dunn, a lone woman carving a life from the unforgiving earth survival, was a daily battle. But one frozen twilight, the wind brought a sound that chilled her more than any blizzard, the cry of a child followed by the howl of a wolf pack. She had a choice: bar her door and save her own life, or face the darkness, and a fate worse than being alone. What she did next would not just save a life, it would ignite a war, expose a traitor, and bind her fate to a people she had been taught to fear. The cabin was a tiny fist of warmth against the jaw of the endless frozen prairie. Matilda Mattie Dunn pressed her forehead against the single warped pane of glass, watching the sun bleed out behind the black teeth of the Bighorn Mountains. It was 2 years to the day since the fever had taken her pa, and 1 year since it had claimed her brother Jonas. Now there was just her, the silence, and the 20-square-foot patch of stubbornness her pa had called a homestead. At 20, Mattie was lean and hard as buffalo jerky, her hands scarred from rope axe and lie. The silence of her life was so profound that any new sound was an intrusion. That's when she heard it. It wasn't the yip of a coyote or the scream of a mountain cat. It was a thin, human wail ripped from a small throat and carried on the same wind that rattled her door latch. Mattie froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Settlers didn't last long out here by mixing their business with strangers. But the cry came again, higher this time, punctuated by a new sound, a low, rumbling growl. "Wolves! Lord have mercy," she whispered, grabbing her Winchester rifle from the pegs above the door. She checked the load, her hands quick and practiced. She pulled on her heavy sheepskin coat, shoved her feet into her pa's old boots, and slid a skinning knife into the sheath on her belt. She didn't hesitate for long. You could bargain with hunger, you could bargain with the cold, but you couldn't bargain with the sound of a child in terror. Stepping outside was like walking into a wall of ice. The wind tore the breath from her lungs. The snow was already knee-deep, the world painted in shades of blue and grey. She moved toward the copse of skeletal cottonwoods by the frozen creek bed, the sound of the growling louder, now a guttural chorus of hunger. The wail had become a series of terrified sobs. Mattie chambered around the shuck-shuck of the mechanism, seeming deafeningly loud. She pushed through a snow-laden thicket and stopped dead. There, backed against a fallen log, was a small boy. He couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. He was dressed in deerskin leggings and a small tunic, pitifully inadequate for the weather. His black hair was matted with snow. His face streaked with tears that froze on his cheeks. Circling him, their eyes glowing like yellow embers in the dusk, were 4 massive grey wolves. They were shadows on the snow, slinking, testing their muzzles, stained. One lunged. The boy screamed. Crack! Mattie's shot was true. The lead wolf spun, yelped, and dropped its body, skidding on the ice of the creek. The other 3 scattered, startled by the rifle's report, but they didn't go far. They were hungry, and the odds were still in their favor. "Get back! Get!" Mattie yelled, her voice hoarse. She fired again, not to hit, but to scare. The bullet kicked up snow, just inches from the lead wolf's paws. It snarled but retreated. Mattie didn't wait. She plunged forward, stumbling through the deep drift, shoving her rifle out ahead of her. "I'm here, run to me!" she shouted. The boy just stared, his eyes wide, with a terror so complete it had paralyzed him. He was Apache. Mattie's breath hitched. Everything her pa had ever told her, stories of raids, of unmatched savagery, of the blood feud between the settlers and the tribes, flashed through her mind. This was not just a child. This was the enemy. A wolf, bolder than the others, charged from the side. Mattie didn't have time to aim. She swung the heavy rifle like a club, catching the beast on the side of its head. It howled in pain and retreated. She grabbed the boy by the arm, yanking him from his frozen spot. "Run!" She half dragged, half carried him, plunging back toward the dim light of her cabin. The wolves followed, flanking them, staying just outside the range of her swinging rifle. They knew she couldn't fire without dropping the boy. Her lungs burned. The boy was a dead weight, his small body shaking violently. They reached the cabin clearing. One wolf made a final desperate dash, leaping for the boy's legs. Mattie spun, putting her own body in the way, and kicked out with her heavy boot catching the wolf in the chest. It tumbled back. She raised the rifle and fired her last shot directly at it. The beast fell. The remaining two, defeated, vanished like ghosts into the swirling snow. Mattie slammed the cabin door, dropped the heavy bar into place, and collapsed against it, dragging the small boy down with her. For a full minute, the only sound was her own ragged breathing and the child's silent, convulsive shudders. He had saved all his sound for the wolves. For her, he had none. He just stared at her, his black eyes holding the reflection of her tiny lone candle. The boy was frozen through. When Mattie pulled back the tattered deerskin tunic, she saw angry red scratches on his shoulder, shallow but painful, where the first wolf had clawed him. His feet, wrapped in thin moccasins, were turning a dangerous waxy white. "You're freezing," she murmured more to herself than to him. She worked quickly, her fear replaced by a blunt, practical focus. She stoked the fire in the hearth until it roared, bathing the cabin in a flickering orange light. She stripped off his wet, frozen moccasins and leggings, her touch efficient, impersonal. He didn't fight her, but his body was rigid as stone. She took a blanket, her last clean one, and rubbed his feet and hands, trying to force the blood back into them, ignoring the small, pained winces. "It's this or you lose 'em," she muttered. "Don't you go dying on me now." She found a tin basin, filled it with snow, and set it near the fire to melt. While it warmed, she took her pa's smallest wool shirt and pulled it over the boy's head. It hung on him like a sack, but it was dry. He watched her every move. He was, she realized, completely silent. The terror had locked his voice away. She soaked a rag in the now tepid water and began to clean the scratches on his shoulder. They were superficial, thank God. She applied a smear of pine tar salve from a tin, the cabin filling with its sharp medicinal scent. The boy flinched but made no sound. "This is all I got," she said, her voice softer than she intended. She ladled a bowl of thin rabbit stew from the pot simmering over the fire. It was mostly broth and a few carrots, but it was hot. She held it out. The boy recoiled, pressing himself against the wall. "It's just stew. Food." Mattie sighed. She set the bowl on the floor and slid it toward him, then retreated to her own stool by the fire. "Eat it or don't. It's no skin off my back." She turned her back to him, a deliberate show of non-aggression, and began cleaning her Winchester. She could feel his eyes on her. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind outside. The wolves, she knew, were feasting on their fallen pack members. A shiver ran down her spine. After a long time, she heard a faint sound, a scrape of wood, a quiet slurp. She glanced over her shoulder. The boy was holding the bowl in both hands, drinking the broth in small, cautious sips. His eyes never left her. A strange, aching loneliness filled Mattie's chest. The cabin had been empty of another human heartbeat for so long. Even this, a terrified child of her sworn enemy, felt different, less empty. "My name is Mattie," she said, pointing to her chest. "Matilda Dunn." He just stared. "What's your name?" He lowered the bowl, his face a mask of confusion and fear. She let it go. He finished the stew, and set the bowl down. She pointed to the small cot where Jonas used to sleep. "You can sleep there. It's safe. The wolves can't get in." He didn't move. Matty sighed, frustrated. She was exhausted. She took her own blanket and tossed it onto the cot. "Fine. Sleep on the floor. I don't care." She lay down on her own bed, a straw-stuffed mattress in the opposite corner, and kept her rifle beside her. She didn't trust him. Not really, but she was too tired to stand guard. She lay in the dark, listening to his breathing, and eventually exhaustion claimed her. She woke to the smell of smoke. Matty shot upright, grabbing her rifle, her heart leaping into her throat. The cabin was filled with a grey haze. The boy was gone. "No!" She breathed, scrambling to her feet. The door was unbarred. "No, you little fool!" She burst outside into the frigid dawn. The world was white and deadly quiet. The boy was standing 20 yards away, a smoking branch in his hand, which he had pulled from her fire. He was waving it, creating a plume of smoke that rose straight up in the still morning air. A signal. "What have you done?" Matty whispered, her blood turning to ice. She ran to him, grabbed the branch and threw it into the snow where it hissed and died. "Do you know what you've done?" He looked up at her, and for the first time his face wasn't terrified. It was determined. He pointed to the south, then to his own chest. "Taza," he said, his voice small and raspy. "Taza," Matty repeated, numb. "Well, Taza, you've just invited your whole family to my door, and they ain't likely to be friendly." She stared south at the vast, empty expanse of white. But it wouldn't be empty for long. They waited. The day dragged on the silence in the cabin, heavier and more brittle than the ice on the creek. Matty barred the door and sat at her small table, cleaning her rifle for the third time, her hands needing a task. Taza sat on the floor, legs crossed perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the door. He was waiting for his people. She was waiting for her death. In her pa's stories, the Apache were wraiths. They came with no sound, only to kill, burn, and disappear. Every settler in the territory knew the name of Korak, the chief of the local band. He was said to be ruthless, a ghost who had eluded the cavalry for a decade, a man who had sworn to drive every last white settler from the Bighorn Basin. And she had his son. "They'll think I stole you," Matty said to the boy, her voice flat. "They'll think I hurt you." Taza just watched her, his small face unreadable. Late in the afternoon, the light already beginning to fade. Matty's mule, tethered in the small lean-to, let out a terrified bray. Taza shot to his feet. Matty's heart stopped. She moved to the window, peering through a small crack in the wood. They were here. Not a war party, not a screaming horde. Just 5 men on horseback, sitting silently on the ridge overlooking her cabin. They were shapes against the grey sky, as still as the rocks around them. Even at this distance, she could feel the menace radiating from them. One rider at the center was larger than the others, a cloak of buffalo hide around his shoulders, and a single eagle feather tied in his long black hair. "They're here," she whispered. Taza ran to the door, fumbling with the heavy bar. "Eight!" he cried, his voice suddenly strong. "Eight! Father, get back from the door!" Matty hissed, pulling him away. A deep voice called out, not in Apache but in clear, heavily accented English. "We seek the boy. Send him out." Matty took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the rifle. "You don't show fear. You don't ever show fear." "The boy is safe," she yelled back, her voice cracking. "He was hurt. I helped him." There was a long silence. The 5 riders began to move, not charging, but slowly fanning out their intent clear. They were surrounding the cabin. "I can't win this." Matty thought a cold dread washing over her. She couldn't shoot a child's father, but she couldn't let them just ride in and kill her. She looked at Taza. He was vibrating with excitement, desperate to get to the men outside. She made a choice. It was a terrible one, but it was the only one she had. "All right," she said, her voice shaking. "We're going out. You're going to stand right in front of me. You understand right in front." Taza nodded, not understanding her words, but her intent. Matty unbarred the door. The cold air hit her like a slap. She put her left hand on Taza's shoulder and held her rifle in her right, pointed at the ground. She pushed the boy gently in front of her and stepped onto the porch. The 5 riders stopped their horses, snorting plumes of steam. The man in the center, the one with the eagle feather, dismounted. He was tall, broader than any man Matty had ever seen. His face was a map of hard lines, his eyes as black and sharp as obsidian. This had to be Korak. He looked at her, his gaze passing over her, as if she were a rock and fixed on his son. "Taza!" the boy yelled, and he broke free from Matty's grip, sprinting across the snow and slamming into the chief's legs. Korak's stone-like face broke. He knelt, sweeping the boy into his arms, crushing him against his chest. He buried his face in his son's hair, speaking in low, rapid Apache, his voice thick with a grief and relief, so profound it was almost visible. The other 4 warriors sat impassive on their horses, but their tension had eased. Matty stood alone on her porch, her rifle held loosely. The danger for a moment had passed. After a long minute, Korak stood holding Taza on his hip. He looked at Matty. He studied her, the lone cabin, the wolf pelts stretched on the wall, the thin plume of smoke from her chimney. His eyes were intelligent, and they held no mercy. He walked toward her, stopping 10 feet away. "You are alone," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Matty said, her voice tight. "My son. The wolves." He pointed to the frozen, half-eaten carcass of the wolf she had shot by the door. "They had him cornered. By the creek. I shot 2, drove the others off." Korak's gaze went to the scratches on his son's shoulder, now covered in her dark pine salve. He looked at the oversized wool shirt the boy was wearing. He looked at the tracks now fading from her cabin to the creek and back. He was reading the story in the snow. "You fought for him," Korak said. Anyone would." Korak's lip curled. "No, not anyone. Not for an Apache." He turned and spoke to his men. One of them dismounted and untied a heavy bundle from his horse. He brought it and laid it in the snow at Matty's feet. It was a massive, freshly killed elk. "We do not take, we trade," Korak said. "You fed my son. We feed you." That's not necessary," Matty stammered. "It is." Korak's voice was final. He looked at her a long, calculating stare. "The woman who lives alone. The Yunai Indian. The one who is enemy. But you are not today." He turned to leave. "Wait," Matty called out, emboldened by a sudden thought. He wasn't just lost, was he? The wolves. He was running. Korak turned back slowly. His face darkened. He was with his mother. They were checking traps. White men came. They ride for the rancher with the H-bar-H. They scattered. H-bar-H. Matty knew the brand. Everyone did. Silas Hatcher. "They took my wife," Korak said, his voice dropping to a deadly low whisper. "Taza ran. He ran for 2 days." A cold, different fear settled on Matty. Silas Hatcher owned the valley, save for her small plot which he'd been trying to buy for a year. He was known as a cruel man, but this... "They will not keep her," Korak said. He looked at the sky. "We ride." He mounted his horse, Taza seated securely in front of him. The small boy looked back at Matty, his face solemn. He raised a small hand. Matty, stunned, raised hers in return. Korak and his men turned their horses and were gone, melting back into the shadows they'd come from. Matty Dunn was left alone again, with a fresh-killed elk, a smoking chimney, and a secret that could get her killed. 2 days passed. The blizzard returned, burying the world in a silent white shroud. Matty spent the time butchering the elk, a gift of meat so vast it would last her the rest of the winter and into the spring. As she worked, her hands numb, her mind raced. Silas Hatcher. He was the uncrowned king of Prosperity Creek, the only town within 50 miles. His H-Bar-H ranch covered more land than the eye could see, and he had a dozen hard men on his payroll, gunslingers known more for their speed than their morals. He'd approached Matty twice, offering to buy her payer's homestead. He'd been polite, oily, his smile never reaching his cold grey eyes. He wanted her spring, the only reliable water source in the South Valley. She had refused. Now she understood he wasn't a man who took no for an answer. He'd stolen a man's wife, left a boy to die. On the third morning, the storm broke. The sun was a weak disk in a pale sky. Matty was splitting firewood when she felt the hair on her neck stand up. Korak was there. He was alone this time, his horse standing near the creek bed. He had appeared as if from the earth itself. He was not dressed for war, but his presence was just as imposing. Matty rested her axe, her heart thumping. "Chief Korak." He walked toward her, stopping a respectful distance away. His face was carved from granite, but his eyes were haunted. "My son is well," he said. "He speaks of the lone woman. He says your fire is warm." "I'm glad he's safe," Matty said quietly. "My wife." He paused, and the grief that rolled off him was a palpable thing. "She is gone. Returned to the earth. Hatcher's men." Matty closed her eyes. "I'm sorry. Truly I am. Sorry as a wind. It changes nothing." He looked at her, his gaze intense. "But what is done can be answered. You saved the son of Korak. You saved the future of my people. This is a debt that cannot be paid with meat." He reached to the pack on his horse. He withdrew an object and held it out. It was not a headdress. It was a hoop about a foot across, made from a single branch of red willow, bent into a perfect circle. It was wrapped in sacred red cloth and strips of otter fur. Tied to the hoop with sinew were 12 of the most perfect mature tail feathers from a golden eagle. They were immaculate, sacred. In the center, a small medicine bag was tied. "This is a wafila," Korak said. A thank you was not the right word. It was a token of a life debt. "A ring of eagle feathers. It carries the wakan, the spirit of the bird, the protection of my ancestors." Matty stared, afraid to touch it. I can't. It's holy. It is. It is for you." He pressed it into her hands. The leather was smooth, the feathers impossibly light. No settler has ever held such a thing. It means you are Nagi Tanka, a great friend. It means my warriors will see this and know you are under my protection. There will be a ring of feathers around this cabin. You are not alone. Matty felt tears sting her eyes, and she was furious at her own weakness. "Why, I'm white. I'm one of them." "You are you," Korak said. "You saw a child, not an enemy. This is a rare thing. Silas Hatcher sees only land only, things to be taken. He will come for this spring. He will not stop." He pointed to the hoop. "Hang this on your door. Let him see it. Let all see it. It is a warning. It is a promise. He will see it as a declaration of war," Matty whispered. "He'll say I'm a traitor." "Are you—" Matty looked at the ring of feathers, this impossible, dangerous, beautiful gift. "I'm just trying to survive." "Then you will need this," Korak said. "Hatcher has brought a new man to Prosperity Creek, a gun hand. They call him Silvertip. He is a man with no soul. He is the one who led the attack on my wife. He will lead the attack on you." Korak mounted his horse. "Be watchful, lone woman. The wind has brought the wolves. Now the men come." He rode away, leaving Matty holding the ring. She felt its weight not in her hands, but on her life. She was no longer a neutral party in a silent war. She had chosen a side simply by saving a child. She went to her door, and with a trembling hand hung the sacred ring of eagle feathers from the latch. It was a mark of honor. It was a target. The elk meat gave Matty a new, grim confidence. She was fed. She was armed. And she was marked. A week later, her supplies of flour and salt ran perilously low. The trip to Prosperity Creek was unavoidable. She left at dawn, her mule loaded with pelts, her rifle across her lap. She left the sacred hoop on her door, a silent guardian for an empty home. Prosperity Creek was 2 false front buildings, a saloon, a smithy and the general store, all huddled along a river of mud. The few people on the street, trappers and townsfolk, eyed her with the usual suspicion. The lone woman of Dunn Spring was an oddity, a woman living where no woman should. She tied her mule outside Stone's Mercantile. The bell above the door chimed a cheerful sound in a dead, quiet place. Jedediah Stone, the proprietor, was behind the counter polishing a jar. He was a small, neat man with wire-rimmed spectacles and a tidy grey beard. He'd always been kind to Matty, often giving her credit when her pa was sick. "Miss Matty, good to see you." He smiled, his eyes crinkling. "Was worried the blizzard had buried you." "Almost, Mr. Stone. Just need the usual. Flour, salt, coffee, and cartridges. Cartridges, expecting trouble." He asked, his tone light as he scooped flour into a sack. "Always," Matty replied flatly. The door chimed again. The air in the store changed. It grew colder, heavier. Silas Hatcher stepped inside, ducking under the low frame. He was a big man, dressed in a tailored black coat and a clean hat, a stark contrast to the mud-caked settlers. He smelled of cigar smoke and money. With him were 2 men. One was a simple cowhand. The other was death. He was tall and gaunt, with hair so pale it was almost white, pulled back in a tight tail. He wore 2 low-slung pistols, their handles a pale, polished silver. This was Silvertip. His eyes, the color of a frozen sky, swept the room and landed on Matty. He didn't smile. He didn't move. He just watched. "Miss Dunn." Hatcher boomed, removing his hat with a flourish. His charm was as thick and false as grease. "A pleasure. It's not often we're graced with your presence." "Mr. Hatcher," Matty said, nodding curtly. "I trust you've reconsidered my generous offer for your little plot of land?" he asked, moving closer. "It's a hard life for a woman alone. A dangerous life. The life suits me," Matty said, turning back to the counter. "Mr. Stone, my things." Hatcher's smile tightened. "I heard you had visitors out your way. Some unwelcome visitors." Matty's blood ran cold. "The prairie is full of visitors, Mr. Hatcher." "Indeed, but I hear you've been fraternizing, making friends with those who are no friends of ours." Jedediah Stone suddenly looked very busy, counting beans in a jar. "I don't know what you mean," Matty said, her hand instinctively moving closer to the knife on her belt. Hatcher laughed. "Oh, I think you do. My men were tracking some rustlers. They passed your cabin. They saw that filth hanging on your door, that Apache trash." Silvertip had not moved, but his gaze was a physical weight on her. That trash, as you call it, was a gift, Mattie said, her voice low and shaking with rage. A gift. Hatcher's face went dark. You're sheltering them. You're a traitor to your own kind, girl. You're consorting with the savages who've been killing our people for years. The only savages I see, Mattie said, her hand on her knife, are the ones who steal women and leave children to be eaten by wolves. The store went dead silent. Jedediah Stone looked up, his face pale with panic. Silvertip moved. He wasn't fast, he was just there. His hand was on her wrist before she'd even cleared the knife. His grip was like a steel trap. That's enough, he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. Hatcher's face was purple with rage. He backhanded Mattie across the face. The crack echoed in the small store. Mattie stumbled back, her cheek stinging, the taste of blood in her mouth. You'll take that thing off your door, Hatcher spat, and you'll be off my land by the end of the week, or Silvertip here will come back and burn you out. It's not your land, Mattie whispered, wiping her mouth. It is now. Hatcher threw a silver dollar on the counter. For her things, Stone. Put it on my account. He and his men turned and left. The bell chimed, and they were gone. Mattie stood, shaking her cheek, swelling. Jedediah Stone bustled around the counter, his hands fluttering. Oh, dear Lord, Mattie, he fussed, grabbing a rag. That man is a devil, a pure devil. Are you all right? I'm fine, Mattie said, pushing the rag away. You've got to leave, child. Jedediah urged, his voice a low, panicked whisper. He finished bagging her supplies. He's not bluffing. Silvertip. They say he burned a whole town in Kansas, just for fun. He'll kill you. It's my home, Mattie said, her voice hollow. It's a dirt floor and 4 walls. It's not worth your life. Jedediah pushed the sacks toward her. Please, Mattie, take Hatcher's offer. I can even talk to him for you. Maybe get you a better price. You're a good man, Jedediah, Mattie said, her vision blurring. She was overwhelmed. She had no allies here. I don't know what to do. Go home, bar your door, and think hard, he said, patting her shoulder. Think very hard. Don't do anything rash. Don't try to ride for the marshal. That's a 3-day ride, and Hatcher's men watch the roads. Mattie nodded, numb. She grabbed her supplies and left the store. Jedediah Stone watched her go, his face a mask of concern. As soon as she was out of sight, he scurried to the back room, where a telegraph line, the only one in town connected directly to Hatcher's ranch, was hidden. He tapped out a quick message. She's rattled, but not broken. She won't sell. She mentioned nothing of the fort, your next move. Jedediah Stone adjusted his spectacles. Business was business after all, and Silas Hatcher was very good business. The slap was a brand. It burned on Mattie's skin for the entire ride home, a physical reminder of her helplessness. When she saw the ring of feathers still hanging on her door, she touched it, her fingers tracing the smooth wood. A ring of feathers around this cabin, Korak had said. Right now it felt like a target. The betrayal, however, was not Hatcher's. That was open, honest hatred. The betrayal was the town. It was Jedediah Stone's kindness, his concerned advice, that was in reality a trap. He'd warned her not to go for the marshal. Why to keep her isolated? To keep her here, a problem Hatcher could solve privately. She was truly alone. The next few days were a war of nerves. Hatcher didn't come. Silvertip didn't appear. But the siege began. It started small. One morning she found the fence to her small corral cut. Her mule was gone. It was a devastating blow, her only transport. She spent a whole day tracking it, finding it 3 miles away, hobbled but safe. A few days later she woke to a new smell. Acrid chemical. She ran to a small vegetable garden, the one she'd toiled over all last summer. It was blackened dead. Salt. They had ridden in the night and sown her garden with salt poisoning the earth. Mattie stood over the ruined patch, her hands clenched. This was worse than a slap. This was a deeper violation. This was an attack on her future, on her food. The final cruelest blow came a week after her trip to town. She went to her spring, the very spring Hatcher coveted to draw her morning water. The water, usually sweet and clear, was murky. A horrific stench rose from it. She crept closer and looked down. Floating in the water, its body wedged in the rocks, was her mule. They had cut its throat and thrown it in. Mattie retched, stumbling back. This was it. This was the end. They hadn't just taken her transport, they had poisoned her water, her lifeblood. She couldn't stay. She had no water, no garden, no mule. She had a cabin full of meat and a few bags of flour. She was being starved out, forced out. Hatcher had won without firing a shot. That night she sat in her cabin, the ring of feathers in her lap. The moon was full, painting the snow in a brilliant, ghostly light. She could see the tracks of Hatcher's men clear as day, leading from the spring. They hadn't even tried to hide them. It was a statement. She had one option. Jedediah Stone's warning echoed in her head. Don't try to ride for the marshal, which meant it was the only thing she could do. It was a 50-mile walk to Fort Reno, the nearest cavalry outpost and marshal's office. It was a desperate, suicidal gamble. But staying was also suicide. She packed a small satchel jerky, a small bag of flour, her remaining cartridges. She would leave in the dead of nightstick to the canyons and pray. She was about to leave when she saw a glint of light on the ridge. A flash. Then another. She ran to the window. It wasn't a reflection. It was a signal lantern blinking. Then she saw the riders. Not 5 this time. At least a dozen, coming not from the ridge but from the east, from the direction of Prosperity Creek. They were riding hard. They weren't waiting for her to leave. They were coming to finish it. He told them, she whispered, her blood freezing. Jedediah, he told them I was still here. He knew I'd be desperate. She looked at the ring of feathers. It is a warning. Korak. He had said his people would be a ring of feathers around her. But where were they? The riders were closer. She could hear the jingle of harnesses, a low laugh. They were led by 2 men, Silas Hatcher, bulky in his greatcoat, and the pale, slender shape of Silvertip. Mattie barred the door. She grabbed her rifle and 2 boxes of cartridges. She went to the back window, the one facing the steep embankment. It was her only way out. Fire! They're going to burn it, she thought. She heard them dismount their boots, crunching on the snow. Done! Hatcher's voice boomed. Last chance. Come out with your hands empty, or we'll burn you out like a rat. Mattie stayed silent, her back pressed to the wall, rifle ready. She ain't in there, boss, another voice called. She's in there. Silvertip's dry rasp cut through the night. The chimney's still warm, and she fouled her own well. She's got nowhere to go. Fine, Hatcher snarled. Burn it! Burn it all! Mattie heard a crash as they smashed her small lean-to. She heard them sloshing liquid. Kerosene. This is for putting your nose where it don't belong, you Apache lover, Hatcher yelled. A torch was thrown. The dry wood of the lean-to caught instantly flames, roaring up, casting a hellish, dancing light. The cabin began to fill with smoke. Mattie choked, backing away from the heat. The front door was an inferno. She ran to the back window. As she did, the window exploded inward, shattered by a rifle butt. Silvertip stood there, a black silhouette against the snow. He raised his pistol. Matty dove, firing her rifle from the hip. The shot went wide, but it made him duck. "She's at the back," he yelled. Matty was trapped. The fire was roaring behind her, the smoke so thick she couldn't breathe. Silvertip was at the window. Hatcher's men were at the front. This was how she died. Just as Silvertip raised his pistol to fire again, a sound split the night. It was not a sound Matty had ever heard, but she knew it instantly. It was the high, thrilling, terrifying cry of an Apache war eagle whistle. It was followed by a dozen more, a chorus of vengeance from the ridges all around them. Hatcher's men froze. "What in the hell? Apache!" One of them screamed just as an arrow, silent and black, thudded into his chest. He fell from his horse. Chaos erupted. From the darkness, from the white, snow-covered ridges, Korak's warriors descended. They were on foot wraiths in the moonlight, moving with a speed and silence that was inhuman. They were not firing rifles. This was not a war, it was an execution. They fell upon Hatcher's men with knives and war clubs. The fight was brutal, personal, and shockingly fast. Hatcher's men, startled, trapped between the burning cabin and the ghosts in the snow, didn't stand a chance. Silas Hatcher, his face a mask of terror, ran for his horse, firing his pistol wildly into the dark. "Silvertip to me!" he screamed. Silvertip, however, was busy. He ignored the chaos, his eyes fixed on the one person he'd come for. He vaulted through the burning window, landing in a crouch as Matty scrambled away from him. "You should have left." He rasped, the firelight gleaming on his pale face. The smoke was thick, but he seemed not to notice. Matty raised her rifle. He was too fast. He kicked it from her hands. She grabbed the skinning knife from her belt as he lunged, his own long knife flashing. They crashed onto the floor. Matty was strong, but he was a seasoned killer. He slammed his forearm into her throat, cutting off her air. His other hand bringing the knife down. She twisted the blade, slicing through her coat and grazing her ribs. She screamed a sound of pure rage and drove her own knife upward into his side. Silvertip grunted, his eyes wide in surprise. He didn't fall. He just paused. He pulled his arm back for another fatal strike. A shadow filled the window. Korak. He didn't fire a shot. He reached in, grabbed Silvertip by his long white hair, and yanked him backward, clean out of the window and into the snow. Silvertip, wounded, tried to roll, but Korak was on him. The chief's face was a terrible thing to behold, a mask of pure, cold fury. This was not the grieving father. This was the warrior. "This," Korak growled, "is for my wife." It was over in seconds. Matty, gasping, crawled away from the flames which were now consuming the cabin roof. She clutched her side, the warm blood seeping through her fingers. She got to her feet and stumbled out the back, collapsing in the snow. The battle, if it could be called that, was over. Hatcher's men were dead or scattered. The Apache were retrieving their arrows, quiet and efficient. But Hatcher was gone. "He's running!" Matty yelled, pointing to the east. "He's getting away!" Korak stood, wiping his blade on the snow. He looked at Matty, then at her bleeding side. He said nothing. He simply whistled. His horse, a magnificent black stallion, appeared from the cottonwoods. Korak mounted in one fluid motion. He didn't ride after Hatcher. He rode to the ridge overlooking Prosperity Creek. He raised his rifle and fired 3 shots spaced evenly. A signal. Then he waited, Matty confused, and in pain watched, as from the east another group of Apache warriors who had clearly been waiting in reserve swept across the valley floor, cutting off Hatcher's escape. He was trapped. Korak had planned for everything. The last sound Matty heard before she fainted was the distant, terrified scream of Silas Hatcher, a sound that was quickly cut off. The first thing Matty felt was pain. It was not the sharp, quick pain of a cut, but a deep, hot liquid throb in her side. The second thing she smelled was not her own cabin. Not the familiar comforting scent of her pa's pine log walls and the dry herbs she hung from the rafters. This was different. It was the earthy, musky smell of smoked leather sage and a faint, sweet medicinal scent she didn't recognize. She forced her eyelids open. They felt heavy as stones. The light was wrong. It was a dim, golden diffused glow, filtering through what she slowly realized was a tipi. The hide stretched tight against the poles. She was lying on a pile of buffalo robes, softer and warmer than any bed she had ever known. A sound, a soft thump, thump, thump came from nearby. Her vision cleared. An old woman, her face a beautiful, profound map of wrinkles, sat by a small, contained fire. She was grinding herbs in a stone bowl, her hands steady and practiced. The woman looked up her black eyes, holding no malice, only a deep, weary wisdom. "You are awake," the woman said. Her voice was like dry leaves, but her English was clear. "Good. The spirit is strong." Mattie tried to sit up, a gasp of agony tearing from her throat as the wound in her side screamed. She fell back, panting. "Be still," the woman said, rising. She came to Mattie with a water skin, lifting her head gently. "Drink. You have slept for 2 days. The wound was deep, poisoned by the chindi metal." She meant Silvertip's blade. "I have cleaned it. The fever broke this morning. 2 days. The memories crashed back in a dizzying, terrifying wave. The fire, the smoke, Silvertip's pale face in the window, the thud of the arrow Korak. "My cabin." Mattie's voice was a dry, rasping croak. "The fire. Hatcher." "It is ash," a deep voice said from the tipi entrance. Mattie tensed her hand, flying to her belt for a knife that wasn't there. Korak entered, ducking his tall frame under the flap. He moved with a warrior's silent grace, his presence filling the small space. He looked at her, his face impassive, but his eyes were not as hard as before. They held a new, complex light. "Ash," Mattie repeated. The word was hollow, empty. A profound despair, colder and heavier than the snow, washed over her. "Everything. My pa's tools, my mother's locket, the rocking chair Jonas made. All gone." She turned her face away from him, a single hot tear of pure, hopeless loss, cutting a clean track through the soot on her cheek. "Not everything," Korak said. He held up his hand. In his grasp was the ring of eagle feathers. It was broken, but it was whole. The willow hoop was blackened, the red cloth scorched away in places, and several of the magnificent tail feathers were curled and singed by the inferno. It was no longer pristine. It was a battle scar. "A warrior pulled it from the doorpost as the wall fell," Korak said. "He knew it was Wakan, a sacred thing. It is yours." He hung it from a tipi pole near her bed, where the dim light caught the iridescent sheen of the remaining perfect feathers. It seemed to watch over her, a damaged, powerful guardian. Mattie reached out her fingers, trembling as she traced the scorched wood. "He's gone, Hatcher. His reign over this valley is over." Korak stated, his voice flat and final. "He ran as cowards do, but my warriors were waiting in the passes. His men are returned to the earth." "And Jedediah Stone?" Mattie asked, the betrayal still a knot of sickness in her stomach. "The man in the store. He was one of them. He told me not to ride for the marshal." Korak's face hardened, the lines around his mouth tightening. "When my warriors cut Hatcher off, he was not alone. The storekeeper Stone was riding to meet him. His saddlebags were heavy with Hatcher's gold. He had chosen his side." Korak looked at the small fire. He found what all snakes find when they are dug from the snow. A cold end. The finality of it was absolute. Justice out here was not delivered by a judge. It was delivered by the land itself. Mattie lay back, the soft robes a strange comfort. "I can't go back," she whispered, the realization sinking in. "Not to the town. They'll say I'm a traitor. They'll know. They'll run me out. Or worse." "They will say nothing," Korak said. "They will whisper in their saloon. They will be afraid. Fear is a stronger fence than any you can build. They will look at your land and know it is protected. They will call you the Witch of the Spring, the Apache friend, and they will leave you be." He crouched by the fire, looking at her, his gaze holding hers. "But you are right. Your old life is ash with your cabin. You are a woman of two worlds now, Matilda Dunn. You do not belong with them. Their laws are false, their kindness a mask, and you are not one of us. You are not Apache. You cannot stay in our camp forever." This was the truth, a new, terrifying loneliness that dwarfed her old one. She was an outcast, from everyone. "So I am nothing," she breathed. "A ghost with no home." "No," Korak said, his voice rising with a sudden rare passion. "You are Nagi Tanka, a great friend. You are the woman who saved the son of Korak. That is not a debt that is paid with one battle. That is a bond for all our lives." He stood and pulled back the tippy flap, letting in a blinding slice of the white, sunlit world. Outside, the Apache camp was quiet but busy. Life was moving on a picture of resilience. "The spring, your spring. My people have cleared it," he said, his voice softer. "The water runs sweet again. The snows will melt. The grass will return. The earth remains Matilda Dunn. And it is still your land." Mattie, confused, looked from him to the old woman, who nodded, a small, knowing smile on her lips. What are you saying? You are a settler." "You must have a settlement," Korak said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. He gestured to two of his warriors who were watching from a distance, holding the reins of their horses. "When you are strong enough to walk, my warriors will ride with you. We will take your horse, and Hatcher's horses. We will ride to the high mountains. We will cut new timber, thick and strong. We will build a new cabin. Stone and pine, a fortress. They will not burn this one." Mattie stared at him, stunned into silence. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were not from loss. You would do that. For me, the debt is paid. You saved my life." "We do this for Tarza," Korak said, touching his own chest. "We do this for the Ring of Feathers. It is our way. You saved the future of my people. We will secure yours." He looked at her, a leader, a father, and now an ally. "You are not alone, lone woman. You have a ring of warriors, a ring of feathers around you, now and always." Mattie looked at the scorched, sacred ring hanging above her. She was homeless. She was wounded. She was an outcast. But as she met Korak's steady gaze, she understood. She wasn't a victim. She was a survivor. And for the first time since her pa had died, the vast, empty, howling prairie didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a home, protected by a new, fierce and unbreakable family. The wind outside still howled, but it no longer sounded lonely. It sounded like a promise. Matilda Dunn's story became a legend in the Bighorn Basin, not a story of riches or power, but one of impossible survival. The settlers in Prosperity Creek kept their distance, whispering about the Witch of Dunn's Spring, who was protected by Apache ghosts. But they never troubled her again. She rebuilt her cabin stronger, with a clear view of the valley, and the scorched ring of eagle feathers hung above her door, until the day she died. Her story is a powerful reminder that the Wild West wasn't just about outlaws and gold. It was about ordinary people like Mattie facing impossible choices. It was about courage, not just the courage to fight, but the courage to be compassionate in a world that demanded cruelty. And it's a story of karma proving that evil, no matter how powerful, eventually faces its own reckoning. What do you think of Mattie's choice? What would you have done? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of survival and unlikely alliances, please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a powerful historical drama, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories from the pages of history. We appreciate your support more than you know.